Yo, Brainrots, welcome back to another video. Let's talk about money. Something we interact with every day, yet it is rarely something we stop to think about in a deeper way. Even though it quietly shapes almost every decision we make, from where we live to what we eat to how we measure success and security in our lives. Most of the time, money feels normal, stable, and permanent, as if it has existed in its current form and always will. But the truth is that money is one of the most flexible ideas humankind has ever created, constantly changing as societies grow, technologies evolve, and old systems stop keeping up with the way people live. To understand where money is going, we first need to understand where it came from, because every major change in money happened for a reason. I'm going to tell you just quietly and basically. Before money existed, people survived through direct change, trading what they had for what they needed. The barter system. If they grew food and someone else raised animals, you could trade grain for meat. If the other person needed grain, you need meat. But the system quickly became complicated as soon as people wanted different things at different times or owned goods that could not be easily divided or stored. Barter required both people to want exactly what the other had at the same moment, which made trade slow and limited. That constant friction pushed humans toward a solution that could make trade smoother, more predictable, and more efficient. So people began using objects that everyone agreed had value. Not because those objects were inherently special, but because they were trusted by the community. Shells, beads, stones, salt, anything, even livestock, became early forms of money. Eventually, metals like gold and silver became the dominant form of money because they solved many problems, lasting over time, resisting decay, being difficult to fake or reproduce. Coins allowed societies to standardize value, making price possible and trade far more efficient. However, metal money came again with serious limitations that became more obvious as the trade expanded across cities, regions, and empires. Carrying large amounts of metal was heavy, dangerous, and impractical, especially as all these economies grew and transactions increased in size and frequency. Control over metal supplies also became a source of power. Many economies were vulnerable to shortages, theft, and political manipulation. As long as money remained physical and scarce, growth was constrained by how much of it realistically could be moved. Paper money did not begin as money itself, but as a representation of value, the money you use right now, stored somewhere else, usually gold or silver, held by a trusted authority. At first, paper notes were simply promises, allowing people to carry proof of value instead of the value itself, which made trade faster, safer, and far more efficient. Over time, however, people stopped redeeming these notes for metal, not because they were forced to, but because the paper worked just as well on its own, as long as everyone trusted the system behind it. The moment marked that moment marked one of the most important psychological shifts in economic history, because money stopped being something you could physically verify and became something you believed in. As governments took full control of the currency, paper money transitioned into what we now call flat fiat money, meaning its value has no longer tied to a physical resource, but instead to trust in the state and stability of its institutions. For a very long time, this system worked extremely well, allowing It's allowed economies to grow faster than ever before, enabling large scale trade, infrastructure, and global expansion. But paper money, like all the other forms of money, that introduced new vulnerabilities that did not exist before. But paper money could be created more easily than metal. Because of that, it became possible to increase the supply faster than the economy itself was growing, which slowly reduced purchasing power of each unit over time. This process, known as inflation, often happens gradually enough that people adapt without noticing. So, as economies grew more global and interconnected, another limitation of paper money became impossible to ignore. Physical cash was slow as shit. Spending money across long distances required physically moving, which made international trade expensive, risky, and inefficient in a world that was increasingly connected through instant communication. Banks became the bridge between physical money and something new, something storing the value digitally and allowing people to access it through accounts instead of cash. At, at first, this change felt small, almost invisible. People still thought of their money in physical terms, using cards and checks as simple tools to move it around. But if you haven't realized already, money had become digital. Over time, these digital systems expanded. Money became Money began to exist primarily as numbers on screens rather than objects in wallets. Online banking, electronic transfers, and mobile payments slowly transformed money into data, making transactions faster, cheaper, and more global than ever before. This shift also changed how people experience spending. They explain how they explain money because when money moves digitally, it no longer feels tangible, making it easier to spend without feeling the immediate loss. Digital money brought enormous efficiency, but it was also concentrated control because banks and financial institutions remained the gatekeepers of access, approval, and participation. As long as these institutions were trusted, the system worked. But repeated financial crises, they exploded, literally exploded its fragility and reminded people that access to money could still be limited, frozen, or denied. That the money of the people that these people work for and put their money in the bank is all controlled by the banks, by the financial system. Cryptocurrency emerged as a response to these weaknesses, not as a replacement for money itself, but as an experiment in removing the need for centralized control. The idea was simple but radical. Instead of trusting banks or governments, people could trust mathematics, cryptography, and distributed networks. Bitcoin was the first successful attempt of this idea, creating a system where transactions were recorded on a shared public ledger, maintained by a network of computers spread across the world. Ownership was proven digitally. Transfers could happen directly between individuals without needing permission from a central authority like banks. This introduced a new way of thinking about money, one where value could move freely across borders independent of traditional institutions. Crypto also introduced the idea that money could be programmable, meaning it could follow rules, execute conditions automatically, and interact with softwares in ways traditional money never could. Although cryptocurrencies brought volatility, complexity, and new risks, they prove something that cannot be undone. Money does not need to be physical and it does not need a single authority to function. Today, we live in a transitional period where multiple forms of money exist at the same time. Cash is still used, but far less than before. Digital payments like credit cards, they dominate daily life. Cryptocurrencies exist alongside these traditional systems, challenging them without fully replacing them. Governments have taken notice and now are fully exploring these digital versions of national currencies, signaling that the future of money will be digital regardless of whether crypto succeeds or fails. Money is increasingly becoming software, and software always evolves. Now, where might money be going in our future? In the future, money may no longer feel like something we actively manage, but something that operates quietly in the background of our lives. Payments may happen automatically, salaries may distribute themselves, financial systems may become more integrated, faster, and less visible. Physical cash may still exist, but more as a backup or symbol than a daily necessity. Crypto may not replace national currencies, but the ideas it introduced are already shaping how money works, pushing systems toward transparency, automation, and global accessibility. Money evolves because humans constantly push towards systems that reduce friction and increase efficiency. Every major shift in money happened when the old system could no longer keep up with how people lived, traded, and interacted. This is not a sudden revolution but a gradual transformation that has been unfolding for centuries. Money is not disappearing, it is transforming quietly and slowly from something physical to something digital to something increasingly invisible. And right now, we are living through one of the most important transitions in the history of money. Not because we chose it, but because change is what money has always done.